My sister-in-law, Chloe, loved to perform. Her favorite stage was any family gathering where she could hold court, and her favorite character was the successful, ambitious career woman. In her narrative, I was cast as the supporting role, the quiet, simple-minded wife with no ambition. She loved to point out my quaint life in front of everyone, patting my hand with a pitying smile. She had absolutely no idea that her next promotion, her team's budget, her entire future at the company she was so proud of, rested in the hands of the very woman she was so publicly mocking. She thought I was nobody. She was about to find out I was her new CEO. The stage for today's performance was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday party. The backyard was a beautiful sea of pastel balloons and fragrant flower arrangements. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the smoky promise of the grill, where my father-in-law was happily stationed. Dozens of relatives milled about, aunts, uncles, and cousins I saw only a few times a year, their polite chatter creating a gentle humming backdrop to the afternoon. It was, by all accounts, a perfect family scene. But in our family, like many others, there are unspoken currents, and the strongest one always flowed directly from my sister-in-law, Chloe. I was content in the quiet eddies, helping my mother-in-law, Martha, carry trays of food from the kitchen and listening to my husband's Uncle Robert tell a long, meandering story about his prize-winning roses. My husband, Mark, was never far. He'd catch my eye from across the lawn and give me a small, reassuring smile. He knew these events were a minefield for me. He knew how much I preferred our quiet life over the performative nature of his family's get-togethers. He loved me for my calm, my steadiness, and he did his best to shield me from the family's resident storm. But you can't shield someone from a hurricane. Chloe made her entrance an hour after the party had started, ensuring maximum impact. She strolled through the side gate like a celebrity on a red carpet, dressed in a sharp designer dress that was wildly inappropriate for a casual backyard barbecue. Her laugh was loud, designed to make heads turn, and they did. The center of gravity in the yard shifted immediately towards her. "Oh my God, I am so sorry I'm late," she announced to no one and everyone. "You would not believe the day I've had. We're in the middle of this massive merger at Innovate Solutions, and my team is leading the charge on the rebranding strategy. My boss basically said the entire Q4 launch rests on my shoulders. It's just insane." I watched as my aunts and cousins gathered around her, their eyes wide with admiration. Mark sighed softly beside me. "Here we go," he murmured, for my ears only. For the next hour, Chloe held her audience captive. She told exaggerated tales of boardroom battles, of her genius marketing campaigns, of the immense pressure she was under. She was the hero of every story. It was during a lull in her monologue that her eyes, like a hawk spotting a field mouse, landed on me. I was sitting with Mark, quietly enjoying a slice of birthday cake. A wicked, familiar glint appeared in her eye. She was ready for her next act, and she needed a supporting character to play the fool. She sashayed over to our table, a crowd of relatives trailing in her wake like pilot fish. "Anna, there you are. I feel like I've barely seen you," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We've been here since noon, Chloe," Mark said flatly. She ignored him, her focus entirely on me. "I was just telling everyone about the madness at Innovate. It's a completely different world. You're so lucky you don't have to deal with that kind of stress." She leaned in, placing a hand on my shoulder. "So tell us, what have you been up to? Still tinkering with those little projects of yours? It's so wonderful you have hobbies to keep you busy." The relative smiled lightly, oblivious to the venom laced in her words. Tinkering was what she called the consulting work I did for a few select tech startups. Hobbies was her word for the quiet, intense passion that had consumed my life for the past decade. I just smiled back. Something like that. My simple, non-committal answer was the opening she was waiting for. She straightened up, addressing the crowd again. I mean, it's just so important to have balance. I'm out there, in the trenches, shaping the future of global tech. It's high stakes, high pressure, 24/7. And then I see Anna, and she's so calm and content with her life, and it's just a wonderful reminder that not everyone is built for that kind of ambition. She turned back to me, her smile now full of pity. Honestly, Anna, it's a gift. Mark is so incredibly lucky to have a wife who is happy to focus on the simpler things, the home, the garden, all of it. While the rest of us are out here battling it out in the corporate world, it's a comfort to know someone is keeping the home fires burning. Someone has to, right? The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. It was a masterpiece of public humiliation, delivered with a smile. She had painted me as a simple, ambitionless housewife, a relic from another era, and herself as a titan of modern industry. I saw the pity in my Aunt Carol's eyes. I saw the flicker of embarrassment on a cousin's face, and I saw the muscles in Mark's jaw tighten as he prepared to leap to my defense. Before he could speak, I placed a calming hand on his arm. I looked at Chloe, at her triumphant, smiling face, and I felt nothing. The years of her small cuts and digs had finally cauterized the wound. There was no pain, no anger. There was only a quiet, cold clarity. She had just drawn a line in the sand, and I knew with absolute certainty that she had no idea on which side of it she truly stood. The future of tech at Innovate Solutions, her future, was a topic I knew a great deal more about than she could possibly imagine, and her performance today had just sealed her fate. I murmured a polite excuse about needing to check on something for Martha and extricated myself from the circle of Chloe's self-aggrandizement. I walked away not with a storm in my heart, but with the profound and weary calm. The sting of her words had long since lost its power, replaced by a sense of observing a play where I was the only one in the room who already read the final act. I found a quiet corner on the far side of the porch, partially hidden by a large potted fern, and looked out at the party. I watched Chloe, now animatedly telling a story that involved her supposedly saving $1 million ad campaign, and my mind drifted back to the origins of my own, much quieter story. My tinkering, as Chloe called it, had begun 10 years ago in a cramped second-floor apartment that constantly smelled like burnt coffee and ozone from an overworked laptop. It wasn't a hobby. It was an obsession. I had been working as a user experience designer for a soul-crushing software company whose products were powerful but agonizingly ugly and difficult to use. My passion wasn't just making things pretty, it was about making technology feel human, intuitive. The idea that sparked it all came to me at 3 a.m, a sudden, blinding flash of insight. A new kind of design framework, a digital grammar that could make any software, no matter how complex, feel as natural to use as reading a book. I named it Emberlight. I poured every penny of my savings into it, quitting my stable job in an act that my own parents had called unthinkably reckless. The first 2 years were a blur of 18-hour days and sleepless nights. My apartment walls were a chaotic mural of whiteboards covered in flowcharts and sticky notes. The floor was a treacherous maze of cables. My diet consisted of whatever could be ordered online and eaten with one hand while the other was on a keyboard. It was a lonely, terrifying, and exhilarating time. My only constant was Mark. He wasn't my husband then, just my fiercely supportive boyfriend. He never once questioned my dream. He was the one who would show up at my door at midnight with takeout, not asking when I would be done, but simply sitting with me while I worked. his quiet presence a silent testament of his faith in me. I remember one night sobbing with frustration after a potential investor had laughed me out of his office, calling my idea arts and crafts, not a business. Mark had simply held me and said, "His loss. He doesn't see what I see." His belief was the fuel that kept embers of my ambition glowing when my own hope ran low. Emberlight's breakthrough didn't come from a big venture capital firm. It came from a small, underfunded literacy nonprofit. They needed a new app to help dyslexic children learn to read, but couldn't afford to hire a design agency. I spent 3 months working with them for free, using their project as the first real-world test for my Emberlight framework. The app we built was beautiful, simple, and incredibly effective. 6 months later, it won a prestigious tech award for innovation in education. Suddenly, the investors who had ignored my emails were calling me. The next 5 years were a whirlwind of growth. The cramped apartment gave way to a small shared office space, then to our own floor in a downtown building. I hired a team of brilliant, passionate designers and engineers who shared my vision. Emberlight wasn't just a product anymore. It was a company, a culture. But I made a deliberate choice. I hired a charismatic CEO to be the public face of the company, while I remained behind the scenes as the chief product officer and majority owner. I didn't want the fame. I wanted the freedom to create. The offer from Innovate Solutions came as a surprise. They were a larger, more established tech giant, the very company where Chloe now worked, but they were struggling. Their products were clunky, their brand was stale. They saw Emberlight not just as an acquisition, but as a lifeline. The negotiation process was long and arduous. They offered me a sum of money that was truly life-altering, but I held out for something more important. I told them I wouldn't sell unless I was given the authority to ensure my framework was implemented correctly. I didn't just want my company's technology. I wanted its soul to be integrated into theirs. The board, desperate for a new direction, eventually agreed to my audacious terms. They didn't just buy Emberlight. They appointed me, Anna Reed, as the incoming CEO of the entire combined company, tasking me with steering the ship through the merger and into the future. The deal had been signed under the strictest non-disclosure agreements. For the past 2 months, I had been working quietly with the board and top-level executives to plan the transition. The official announcement to the company's employees, including a certain mid-level marketing manager named Chloe, was scheduled for a company-wide town hall meeting in 2 weeks. I took a slow sip of my lemonade, the cold glass a stark contrast to the burning irony of the situation. I looked back at the party. Chloe was now complaining to my mother-in-law about how much work the merger was creating for her marketing department. She spoke with the authority of someone on the inside, someone in the know. She had no idea she was speaking to the mother of the woman who had architected the entire deal. She saw me as an outsider, a simple, ambitionless nobody. The truth was, I wasn't just on the inside, I was the inside. Her entire professional world, the one she lorded over me, was now contained within mine. And as I watched her laugh, basking in the glow of her family's admiration, I felt a strange sense of peace. The performance was almost over. The final act was about to begin. I stayed in my quiet corner of the porch for a long time, watching the party from a distance. I watched my husband, Mark, gracefully navigate conversations, always subtly steering them away from any topic that might lead back to me. He was my protector, my gentle guardian against the casual cruelties of his own family. But as I watched him, a new, unfamiliar feeling began to root in my heart. It wasn't anger at Chloe anymore. It was a deep, profound weariness of my own silence. My desire for privacy, which had started as a shield to protect my work, had slowly insidiously become a cage that allowed others like Chloe to define me. Just as I was about to rejoin the party, my quiet solitude was broken. It was Chloe. She had evidently exhausted her audience outside and had come looking for a new one, or perhaps for a fresh target to reaffirm her own fragile sense of superiority. She held 2 glasses of wine, offering one to me with a saccharine smile. "Hiding back here all by yourself, Anna?" she chimed, her voice bright and brittle. "I was just telling everyone about the Innovate Solutions Family and Friends summer picnic next weekend. It's a huge deal. They rent out the entire botanical gardens. There's catering, live music. They even have a whole section for an executive meet and greet. It's a major networking event, even though it's supposed to be casual." I took the glass, murmuring a thank you. "It sounds very nice." "It is," she said, leaning against the railing beside me, her eyes scanning the crowd as if she were a queen surveying her subjects. "It's one of the perks of working for a real, successful company. They invest in their culture. They invest in their people." She took a dramatic sip of her wine. "You know, you and Mark should come. As my guests, of course." The offer hung in the air, coated in a thick layer of condescension. It wasn't an invitation, it was a challenge. A chance for her to parade me through her professional territory, to showcase me as her quaint employment sister-in-law. "It would be good for you to get out," she continued, her voice softening into a tone of faux concern that was far more insulting than her overt bragging. "You could see what a place like Innovate is really like. It might be inspiring for you, give you some ideas for your little projects." In that moment, something within me clicked into place. All the years of biting my tongue, of smiling politely, of allowing her to paint her own narrative at my expense, it all came to a head. I looked at her perfectly manicured nails, her expensive dress, the desperate need for validation swimming in her eyes, and I saw her not as a monster, but as a deeply insecure person whose entire self-worth was tied to her job title at a company she knew nothing about. And I realized that avoiding her, hiding from these situations, was a form of surrender. It was allowing her version of the world to be the only one on display. It was letting her win. My desire for privacy had become an accidental accomplice to her cruelty. My decision was not a sudden, angry declaration. It was a quiet, internal shift, a realignment of my own priorities. I was tired of living in a cage, no matter how comfortable or well-intentioned. The company picnic wasn't her territory. It was, in the most literal sense, mine. I wasn't planning a grand theatrical revenge. The theatrics, I decided, could belong to Chloe. My plan was far simpler. I was just going to show up. I was going to exist, as myself, in my own space. The consequences of that simple act would be their own reward. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, my voice even and surprisingly light. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. Mark and I would love to come." The genuine surprise on her face was a small, satisfying victory in itself. She had expected me to demur, to make an excuse. My easy acceptance threw her off script. She quickly recovered, a smug smile returning to her face, clearly interpreting my agreement as a sign of her own persuasive power. "Great," she said. "I'll forward you the details. Just try to dress the part, okay?" On the car ride home, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Mark was fuming. "I cannot believe she said that to you, Anna. Inspiring for you. The nerve. We are not going to that picnic. I'll tell her we have other plans. I'm done. I'm drawing a line. I let him vent, his anger a warm, protective blanket. When he was finished, I reached over and placed my hand on his. Actually, I said, calmly, I told her we would go. He glanced at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. What? Why? You don't have to put yourself through that. I know, but I think I want to. We can't spend our lives building walls to keep Chloe out, Mark. It's exhausting. Let's just go. We'll eat some free food, listen to some music. We'll just have a nice day out. No drama, no fighting. He searched my face, looking for any sign of distress or reluctance. He found none. All he saw was a quiet, unshakable resolve he hadn't seen before. He saw that I wasn't being forced into a decision. I was making a choice. He squeezed my hand, his own anger subsiding, replaced by his unwavering trust in me. Okay, he said softly. If you're sure, we'll go. I turned to look out the window at the passing city lights. The Innovate Solutions tower, a familiar silhouette on the skyline, slid past. Chloe's little kingdom. She thought she was inviting me into her world, but the truth was, I was about to welcome her into mine. The stage was set, the invitations were sent, and the star of the show had no idea her role was about to change. The Innovate Solutions Family and Friends summer picnic was every bit as extravagant as Chloe had described. It was held in the sprawling, manicured grounds of the city's botanical gardens, a private oasis of green lawns and vibrant flower beds. A massive banner proclaiming the company's logo was strung between two ancient oak trees, and the air was filled with the sounds of a live jazz band, the cheerful shouts of children playing, and the general murmur of hundreds of conversations. It was a carefully orchestrated display of corporate success and employee morale. As Mark and I walked through the entrance, I felt a strange and unsettling sense of dual ownership and anonymity. Every smiling employee, every happy family was now, in a way, my responsibility, and not a single one of them knew my name. We found a relatively quiet spot under the shade of a large magnolia tree, spreading out a blanket and simply taking in the scene. Mark, ever my protector, had positioned us away from the main thoroughfares, hoping to delay the inevitable encounter with Chloe. For an hour, we existed in a peaceful bubble. We ate catered food that was surprisingly delicious. We listened to the music, and we talked about everything and nothing. I watched the employees of my new company, observing the dynamics, listening to the snippets of conversation. I saw the engineering teams engaged in a fiercely competitive game of volleyball, and the sales teams gathered near the bar, their laughter the loudest in the park. It felt like I was an anthropologist, studying the culture of a newly discovered tribe I was about to lead. Our bubble was eventually and inevitably burst by Chloe. She spotted us from across the lawn and marched over with the determination of a heat-seeking missile. She wore a company-branded polo shirt tucked neatly into tailored shorts, a name tag with Chloe Reed Marketing gleaming on her chest. "There you are," she exclaimed, her voice a little too loud. "I was wondering where you two were hiding. You're missing everything." She didn't wait for a response, instead grabbing my hand and pulling me to my feet. "Come on, I'll give you the grand tour." For the next 30 minutes, we were dragged through Chloe's personal kingdom. She paraded us past her colleagues, introducing Mark with pride and me with a dismissive wave. "This is my brother Mark, and this is his wife Anna." The unspoken addendum hung in the air every single time. She pointed out the different departmental tents, as if they were exhibits in a zoo. That's the data science pavilion over there. Super technical, all numbers and algorithms. You wouldn't find it interesting at all, Anna. Her tour culminated in front of a large white marquee tent set off from the main area by velvet ropes. Inside, a quieter, more exclusive gathering was taking place. And that, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is the executive lounge, the C-suite. My boss, Mr. Davies, the senior VP of global marketing, is in there. This is where the real magic happens. She puffed out her chest. He and I are working very closely on the Emberlight merger integration. It's a huge project. The irony was so thick, I could barely breathe. She was bragging about her minor role in a project I had architected from the highest possible level. Just as I was about to suggest we head back to our blanket, Chloe's eyes lit up. "Oh my God, there he is," she whispered excitedly. A distinguished man with silver hair and a warm smile, Mr. Davies, had just stepped out of the tent. "Okay, stay right here. Be normal." She practically ran over to him, her posture shifting into one of sycophantic eagerness. "Mr. Davies, so wonderful to see you enjoying the day." She then gestured grandly back towards us. "I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to my family. This is my brother Mark and his wife Anna." Mr. Davies turned and smiled politely. He shook Mark's hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mark." Then his eyes fell on me. The change was instantaneous and total. The casual, friendly smile on his face vanished, replaced by a look of wide-eyed, profound shock. His posture straightened. The easygoing boss disappeared, and a top-level executive standing before his ultimate superior took his place. He seemed to momentarily forget how to speak. "Anna," he finally stammered, his voice a full octave higher than before. He quickly corrected himself. "I mean, Ms. Reed, good afternoon. I had no idea you were planning to attend. It's a true honor to see you here. I hope everything is to your satisfaction. Is there anything you need?" Chloe stared, her head cocked like a confused puppy. Her perfectly constructed social world was beginning to fracture. "Oh," she said with a nervous laugh, trying to reclaim control of the situation. "You two know each other?" Mr. Davies looked at Chloe as if she had lost her mind. His own confusion was now directed at her inexplicable familiarity with the new head of the company. "Know her?" he repeated, his brow furrowed. He looked back at me, then at Chloe's proud name tag, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with an audible gasp. He turned to Chloe, his professional smile now gone, replaced by a look of utter gravity. "Chloe," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, as if explaining a very simple concept to a child. "Anna is Reed." He paused, letting the name hang in the air before delivering the final, world-altering blow. "Anna is the founder and visionary behind Emberlight. As of the completion of the merger, she is the new CEO of Innovate Solutions. All of us," he made a sweeping gesture that included himself, the tent behind him, and the entire picnic, report to her now. Time seemed to stop. The cheerful music from the band, the laughter of children, the distant chatter, all faded into a dull, humming void. All I could see was Chloe's face. The confident, condescending smile she had worn all day froze, then cracked, then crumbled into a mask of pure, silent horror. Her vibrant color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, darted from the terrified face of her boss to my own calm, neutral expression. In that single horrifying moment of clarity, I could see her replaying every single condescending remark, every pitying smile, every dismissive gesture she had ever directed at me. She hadn't just been making fun of her quiet sister-in-law. She had been publicly, repeatedly, and enthusiastically mocking her own CEO. I simply offered a polite smile to her boss. "Please, Mr. Davies, call me Anna," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's a lovely event. You and your team have done a wonderful job." The silence that followed Mr. Davies' announcement was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was a vacuum, sucking all the cheerful noise from the picnic into a black hole of pure, unadulterated shock. Chloe stood frozen, a statue of mortification. Her boss, Mr. Davies, looked like a man who had accidentally stumbled into a lion's den and was desperately trying not to make any sudden movements. The colleagues who had been standing nearby, witnessing Chloe's casual cruelty just moments before, now stared at their shoes, at the sky, at anything other than the horrifyingly awkward scene unfolding before them. I knew in that moment that my response would define my leadership more than any memo or meeting ever could. I gave Mr. Davies a small, reassuring smile, deliberately breaking the tension. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," I said, my voice calm and even. "I appreciate the warm welcome. I wanted to see the company culture firsthand, and I have to say, your team has put on a truly wonderful event. The live music is a fantastic touch." My words, so normal and professional, were a lifeline. Mr. Davies seized it, launching into a slightly too enthusiastic explanation of the vendor he'd chosen for the catering. I listened patiently, asking a few pertinent questions about employee feedback initiatives. I did not look at Chloe. I did not acknowledge her presence. I acted as any new CEO would, engaging with a senior executive. And in doing so, I made her more invisible than she had ever tried to make me. My complete and utter dismissal of her personal meltdown was a more powerful statement than any angry retort could ever be. After a few excruciatingly long minutes, Chloe made a small, strangled sound and muttered something about needing to use the restroom before practically fleeing, her face a blotchy, tear-streaked mess. The small crowd that had been trapped by the drama dissipated instantly, whispering amongst themselves as they scurried away. The rest of the picnic was a study in shifted realities. The news spread through the event with the speed of a digital virus. Within the hour, there wasn't a person there who didn't know the identity of the quiet woman in the simple summer dress sitting under the magnolia tree. The deference was immediate. Executives I had only ever met on video calls came over to introduce themselves formally, their handshakes firm, their eyes full of a newfound, cautious respect. Mark, my dear Mark, was trying his absolute best not to laugh. He sat beside me on the blanket, a huge grin plastered on his face. "So," he whispered as a vice president of operations walked away, "that was something." "It was bound to happen eventually," I said, taking a bite of a strawberry. "The look on her face, Anna," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "I almost feel sorry for her." "Almost," I agreed, and we shared a small, secret smile. The true reckoning, however, came not at the picnic, but on Tuesday morning. I received a meeting request from Chloe. The subject line simply read, "Quick chat." I accepted. She entered my new corner office, an office far larger and with a much better view than Mr. Davies, like a prisoner walking to her own execution. She was pale and her hands were trembling. She stood before my desk, refusing to sit. "Anna," she began, her voice barely a whisper. She corrected herself. "Miss Reed, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. I had no idea. I was just joking around. You know how families are. It was just teasing. I am so sorry." Her apology was a frantic, pathetic scramble for survival. She wasn't sorry for the years of casual cruelty, for making me feel small, for her relentless judgment. She was sorry she had been caught. She was terrified of losing the job that formed the very bedrock of her identity. I listened patiently until she was finished. I didn't offer her comfort. I didn't offer her forgiveness. I offered her professionalism. "Chloe," I said, my voice neutral and calm, "please sit down." She perched nervously on the edge of a chair. "I appreciate you coming to speak with me. Let me be perfectly clear so there are no misunderstandings going forward. Our family relationship and our professional relationship are now two entirely separate things. Here, in this building, you are a marketing manager and I am the CEO. Your future at Innovate Solutions will be determined by the exact same criteria as every other employee: the quality of your work, the results you deliver, and the professionalism you demonstrate. Nothing else. Is that understood? Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded mutely. She understood. She was not being fired. She was being given a far worse sentence. She was trapped. Her career, her ambition, her entire sense of self-worth was now completely and totally at my mercy. And my mercy would be dictated by merit, a concept she had never once applied to me. The final shift occurred at the next family dinner. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Chloe was silent, her eyes fixed on her plate, speaking only when spoken to. But the most interesting change came from the rest of the family. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they now looked at me with a new curiosity. They asked about my work, not as a hobby, but with genuine interest. They asked for my opinion on the stock market, on new technologies. The family's center of gravity had permanently shifted. I had not changed at all, but their perception of me had been completely remade. I didn't revel in Chloe's humiliation or my newfound status. The victory wasn't in her defeat. The real vindication was the quiet, profound sense of freedom, the freedom to simply be myself in every context, without apology. Chloe's cruelty, I realized, was never really about me. It was a reflection of her own deep-seated insecurities. My success didn't diminish her. Her own fear of being diminished did. I had spent years in a cage of my own making, hiding my success to keep the peace. But peace at the cost of self-respect is no peace at all. The most effective power isn't the kind you have to flaunt. It's the kind you hold in reserve. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are, no matter what anyone else thinks. A truly satisfying story about the danger of underestimation. What do you think Chloe will do now? Let us know your predictions in the comments below. If you loved watching karma being served, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more daily revenge stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss a single upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. My husband's family thought they were putting me in my place. For their grand luxury vacation, the one they had been planning for a year, they gave me a tiny, windowless room in the staff quarters, a room usually reserved for a maid. They wanted me to feel small, out of place, and worthless. What they didn't know, as they sipped champagne in their opulent multi-room suites, was that every single polished floor, every fresh flower arrangement, every smiling employee in that hotel ultimately answered to me. They thought they were the VIPs. They were about to find out they were merely guests in my home. The entire affair had been orchestrated by my mother-in-law, Eleanor, for months. It was a celebration of her husband's retirement, but it was truly a celebration of her own perceived status. The destination she chose was the Sterling Point Lodge, a place whose name she would drop into conversations with a casual, practiced air. "Oh, you simply must go," she'd say to her friends. "The service is just unparalleled. Of course, it's nearly impossible to get a reservation." I would sit through these planning dinners, listening to her extol the virtues of the hotel's thread count and the exclusivity of its spa, a quiet, secret smile on my face. She was describing, in glowing terms, the flagship property I had inherited from my grandmother. She was bragging about a world she was only allowed to visit, a world that I owned. The day of our arrival felt like the opening scene of a play where I was the only one who knew the ending. We pulled up the long, winding driveway, the majestic, rustic chic facade of the lodge coming into view. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed forward. Eleanor swept out of her car like visiting royalty, expecting the world to bow. And in a way, it did. That was the Sterling Point promise, after all. As we walked into the grand lobby, I had to suppress a knowing smile. The scent of pine and cedar from the massive stone fireplace was exactly as I'd specified in my last quarterly review with the management team. The vast hand-woven rug in the center of the room was from a local artisan I had personally commissioned. I saw David Chen, the general manager, a man I had spent hours with on video calls, standing near the reception desk. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second, and I gave him the slightest, almost imperceptible shake of my head. He understood immediately, his professional mask slipping back into place, as he turned his attention to the other guests. For now, I was just Isabella, Liam's quiet wife. The charade began at the check-in desk. Eleanor presented herself with a grand flourish. "The Harrison party. We have 3 of your finest suites reserved." The young woman at the desk, clearly well-rehearsed, put on a look of profound distress. "Oh, Mrs. Harrison, there seems to be a problem with the booking system. I am so terribly sorry. We have your 2 signature suites, but the 3rd, it seems to have been double booked." Eleanor launched into a magnificent performance of indignation. "Double booked? That is simply unacceptable. I booked these 6 months ago. This is a very important family celebration." My husband, Liam, knew his mother's theatrics well. The front desk manager was summoned, apologies were made, and then came the solution, delivered with a tone of grave sincerity. "We have been able to find one other room on the property. It is in our north wing. It's a bit more modest, but it is available. We can, of course, offer it at a significant discount." My sister-in-law, Jessica, who had been observing with a smug look on her face, chose this moment to chime in. "Oh, a single room. Well, I suppose that's better than sleeping in the car," she said with a laugh. She turned to me, her eyes full of fake pity. "Isabella, you won't mind, will you? You and Liam are so adaptable. Besides, how much time do you really spend in your room on vacation?" Liam's face was a thundercloud. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice low and firm. "We're not staying in a broom closet while the rest of you are in suites. Mom, this is insulting." "Don't be dramatic, Daniel," Eleanor chided, waving her hand dismissively. "It's a simple booking error. We have to make do. Isabella understands. She's not one to make a fuss." All eyes turned to me. They were waiting for me to accept my place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. I could have ended it right there. A single sentence to the manager, a quiet word in his ear, and the founder's suite would have been ours in minutes. But as I looked at Eleanor's triumphant face, I saw the pathetic nature of her little power play. She needed this victory. She needed to feel superior. And I decided, in that moment, to let her have it. The fall would be so much more spectacular from a greater height. I gave Liam's arm a gentle squeeze and offered the group a calm smile. "It's all right, Liam. Don't worry about it," I said, my voice soft but steady. "Jessica's right. It's just a place to sleep. Let's not ruin the start of a wonderful family vacation over something so small." The relief on Eleanor's face was disgusting. She had won. She had successfully put me in my place. A bellhop was summoned, but instead of leading us to the grand elevators, he led us past the bustling kitchens, down a long, sterile, white-walled service corridor. He stopped at a small, unassuming door at the very end, marked simply 113B. He unlocked it and swung it open. The room was clean, but tiny, and utterly devoid of charm. A small bed was pushed against one wall, and the single tiny window looked out directly over the rumbling kitchen exhaust fans and a row of large green dumpsters. This was my room? In my hotel? I stepped inside. the worn, thin carpet rough beneath my feet, and as a door clicked shut behind me, I felt a slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. The game was on. The room was, to put it mildly, an insult. It was less a guest room and more a storage closet that had been grudgingly outfitted with the bed. The air was stuffy, thick with the smell of industrial cleaner and the faint, greasy scent of the kitchen vents just outside. The single, small window was high on the wall, offering a stunning panoramic view of a large green metal dumpster and a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. The walls were so thin I could hear the rhythmic clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the shouted conversations of the staff. The bed, when I dared to sit on it, groaned in protest. Its mattress was a landscape of hidden lumps and sorrowful dips. Liam, my husband, was pacing the 3 short steps from the door to the window, his face a thundercloud of helpless fury. He was a good man, a kind man, and his mother's casual cruelty towards me was a constant source of pain for him. This is it. This is the last time. I don't care if it's Dad's retirement party, we are leaving. I will not let her treat you this way, Isabella. This isn't a mistake. It's a message. She did this on purpose to humiliate you. I know, I said softly, from my perch on the lumpy bed. Then let's go, he urged, his hands clenched into fists. We'll go to another hotel. A better one. We'll send a note and say you weren't feeling well. I will not have you sleeping in a broom closet. I reached out and took his hand, my calmness a stark contrast to his rage. Liam, look at me. He stopped pacing and met my eyes. If we leave, she wins. She wants a reaction. She wants us to cause a scene so she can play the victim, the poor mother whose son's difficult wife ruined a family vacation. We would be playing her game. Right now, she thinks she has all the power. I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Let her think that for just a little while longer, please, for me. Let's just stay here tonight. He searched my face, looking for any sign of hurt or distress. I'm sure he found it, but beneath it, he also saw a deep, quiet resolve that he had come to recognize in me. He sighed, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. Okay, he said, for you, but I am not happy about it. He went into the tiny bathroom to splash some water on his face, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I looked around the sad little room, at the single thin towel and the generic bar of soap, and my mind drifted back to another room in another hotel decades ago. It was the memory of my grandmother, Sophia. My grandmother, the founder of the entire Sterling Point Hotel empire, had started her life in America as a maid in a grand, imposing hotel just like this one. She was an immigrant with nothing but a fierce work ethic and an almost supernatural understanding of people. She told me once that she learned everything she needed to know about business from cleaning other people's rooms. She learned that the wealthiest guests were often the most miserable and that the business travelers were often lonely. She learned that a small, thoughtful gesture, an extra pillow, a glass of water left at bedside, was worth more than all the gold leaf in the lobby. I remember being a young girl, trailing her through the hallways of her first hotel, which she bought after saving every penny for 15 years. She would let me help the housekeeping staff, teaching me how to fold the corners of the bed sheets into perfect, crisp triangles. Never trust a leader who has not scrubbed a floor, mia cara, she would tell me, her voice thick with her beautiful melodic accent. They do not understand the foundation of the house. They see the guests, but they do not see the people who make the guests comfortable. True hospitality, she would say, tapping my nose, starts here, with the dignity of this room. She built her empire on that philosophy. Sterling Point was never meant to be about snobbery or exclusion. It was meant to be a sanctuary. Her secret weapon wasn't a business strategy, it was empathy. She believed luxury wasn't a price point, it was a feeling. the feeling of being cared for, of being seen, of finding a moment of peace. And as I sat there in that cramped, forgotten room, I felt a deep, profound anger, not for myself, but for her. Eleanor, with her petty, cruel games, was desecrating my grandmother's legacy. She was using this place, a place built on a foundation of kindness and respect for all people, as a weapon to enforce her own pathetic social hierarchy. She and her daughter were exactly the kind of guests my grandmother pitied. People so blinded by status that they couldn't see the value in anything but a price tag. My secret weapon wasn't just the fact that my name was on the deed to this entire property. It was the philosophy my grandmother had instilled in me. It was the knowledge that the general manager, David Chen, a man I had handpicked, had been trained by her most trusted protege and understood her vision completely. He knew that the Sterling Point way was to treat the person in the smallest room with the same dignity as the person in the largest suite. The dull ache of humiliation in my chest was gone now, replaced by a cold, hard sense of purpose. This was no longer just a family squabble. Eleanor had made it about the very soul of my inheritance. She had judged me unworthy to sleep in a proper room in the house my grandmother had built. She had no idea that I was not just a guest, I was the guardian of that house. And I had a duty to remind her, and her entire family, what true class really looked like. My quiet acceptance was over. It was time to make a reservation for a lesson in humility. Back in the cramped, stuffy confines of room 113B, Liam's anger, which had been simmering all afternoon, finally boiled over. He paced the small strip of worn carpet, his movements caged and furious. "I can't do this, Isabella," he said, his voice a low, frustrated growl. "I can't just sit here and pretend this is okay. She's my mother. But this is cruel. It's a deliberate, calculated insult, and I feel like a coward for letting you just accept it." I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed and watched him, my own heart aching for his. He was a good man trapped in a web of familial obligation and toxicity. I waited for his anger to burn itself out, and when he finally stopped pacing and sank onto the room's single, sad chair, I spoke softly. "What would happen if we left?" I asked. "She would be furious," he admitted. "She'd call everyone, tell them I was being dramatic, that you were being difficult. She would twist it. She would make herself the victim." "Exactly," I said. "And your father's retirement celebration would be ruined. This entire trip, which is meant to honor him, would become about us and your mother's drama. We would be playing her game, by her rules. The only way to win a game like that, Liam, is to refuse to play." I stood up and straightened the thin, threadbare comforter on the bed. "So for tonight, we stay. We endure. We will be gracious and polite. And tomorrow, we will play a different game entirely. My game." He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but he saw the unshakable resolve on my face and simply nodded. He trusted me. Dinner that evening was an exercise in supreme self-control. We were seated in the hotel's flagship restaurant, a soaring space of exposed wood beams and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, a restaurant whose menu I had personally approved 3 months ago. The Harrison family was at a large, round table in the center of the room, a clear power position. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was in her element. "The service here is just impeccable, isn't it?" she declared loudly to the table after a waiter had refilled her wine glass. "You truly get what you pay for." Her daughter Jessica seized the opportunity. "It's all about the details," she said, looking directly at me. "Our suite is just divine. The towels are so fluffy, and we have a balcony with a fireplace. How is your room, Isabella? Is it quiet back there in the north wing?" "It's perfectly fine, thank you," I replied with a calm smile, taking a sip of water. "I do hope the service hallway isn't too noisy for you at night." Eleanor added, her face a mask of fake concern. I know the staff starts their prep work very early, but I suppose it's a small price to pay for all of us being together. I endured it all. The passive-aggressive questions, the loud descriptions of their luxurious accommodations, the constant, subtle reminders of my place. I smiled, I nodded, I ate my perfectly cooked salmon, and I said nothing. Liam sat beside me, a coiled spring of tension, but my calm seemed to soothe him. He followed my lead, letting the insults wash over us without comment. Eleanor and Jessica, frustrated by my refusal to be baited, eventually grew bored and turned their attention to gossiping about their friends. They thought my silence was weakness. It was, in fact, the quiet gathering of strength before a storm. Later that night, back in our tiny room, the sounds of clanging pots from the kitchen below finally subsided. Liam, exhausted by the day's emotional turmoil, had fallen into a restless sleep. The digital clock on the bedside table read 1:17 a.m. The hotel was quiet. My hotel. I opened my laptop, the bright screen a stark contrast in the dim room. I bypassed the public guest network and logged directly into the Sterling Point corporate mainframe, my access absolute and unrestricted. I pulled up the schematics for the lodge, my eyes tracing the layout I knew by heart. I then accessed the live reservation manifest. I saw the Harrison party, occupying suites 401, 403, and 405. And I saw my own name, a late manual entry next to room 113B. At the very top of the list, blocked out in perpetuity for my personal use, was the jewel of the entire property, the Founder's Suite. My decision, which had been forming all day, now crystallized into a clear, precise plan of action. I picked up my phone, my fingers scrolling to a number saved under DC Private. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. David Chen speaking. David, it's Isabella, I said softly, so as not to wake Liam. There was a brief, stunned silence on the other end. Isabella, is everything all right? I saw your name on the arrivals list, but the room number, I thought it must be a mistake. It's not a mistake, David, but it is a situation, and I would appreciate your assistance in resolving it. Are you free to talk? Of course, for you always. Good, I said. Here is what I would like you to do. Tomorrow morning, at precisely 10 a.m., I would like you to personally greet the Harrison party in the main lobby. That's Eleanor Harrison's group. Please inform them that as part of their VIP package, you will be giving them a private tour of the property's signature features. I could hear the faint sound of a pen scribbling on paper. I want you to show them the spa, the wine cellar, and the view from the terraced restaurant. I want them to have the full Sterling Point experience. Consider it done, he said. Conclude the tour, I continued, my voice low and even, at the Founder's Suite. Please ensure that housekeeping has it fully prepared for immediate occupancy. My husband and I will be moving our things there after the tour. I understand completely, Isabella. And David, I added the final, crucial piece of the plan. When you show them the suite, please be sure to mention that it has been prepared for a particularly valued, high-priority guest who is staying with us this weekend. Let them believe for a moment that it might be for them. Let's give them a memory they won't soon forget. A slow smile crept into his voice. Isabella, he said with a tone of deep, personal loyalty that reminded me so much of my grandmother. It would be my absolute pleasure. I ended the call and shut my laptop. I walked to the small, grimy window and looked out at the dark service alley. The game was no longer being played by Eleanor's rules. I had just taken control of the entire board. I wasn't just changing rooms, I was orchestrating a quiet, bloodless coup, a lesson in humility delivered on a silver platter. And it was going to be a beautiful morning. I awoke the next morning not to the gentle sunlight I was used to, but to the utilitarian rattle of a service cart being pushed down the hallway outside our door. The air was already thick and warm, and the incessant hum of the kitchen vents was to be my alarm clock. I glanced at Liam, still asleep beside me, his face etched with the frustrated frown even in slumber. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt for putting him through this. But then I remembered the cold, dismissive look on his mother's face, and my guilt was instantly replaced by a steely resolve. Today was not about revenge. It was about reestablishing the truth. We met the family in the grand lobby at 9:30. They were already assembled, sipping coffee from delicate porcelain cups near the massive stone fireplace. Eleanor and Jessica were dressed in expensive, matching tennis whites, looking for all the world like they owned the place. They looked rested, smug, and utterly superior. "Ah, there you are," Eleanor called out as we approached, her voice a little too loud. "Did you two manage to get any sleep at all? I was so worried the staff noise would keep you up." "It was fine," I said with a placid smile. "We slept like rocks." Jessica chimed in, a cruel little smirk playing on her lips. "I'm sure. A small dark room can be quite womb-like. We, on the other hand, barely slept a wink. The sunrise from our balcony was just too spectacular to miss." Liam opened his mouth to retort, but at that exact moment a figure of serene authority emerged from a nearby office. It was David Chen, the general manager. Looking immaculate in a perfectly tailored suit, his posture exuding a quiet confidence. He moved directly towards our group, his face a mask of professional warmth. "Mrs. Harrison," he began, addressing Eleanor with a polite bow of his head, "a pleasure. I trust your first night with us was exceptional?" "It was divine, David, simply divine." "Excellent," he said. "To thank you for your patronage, and as a small apology for the booking error yesterday, the hotel would like to offer your party a private complimentary tour of our signature features this morning, if you are amenable. I would be honored to lead it myself." Eleanor's face lit up with triumph. She shot a look at me, a look that said, "See, this is how important people are treated." "Why, David, we would be absolutely delighted," she exclaimed. The tour that followed was a masterclass in performative luxury. David Chen led us through the resort with a quiet, practiced grace, his every word designed to impress. We saw the tranquil marble-lined spa where he described a signature treatment involving volcanic clay and orchid-infused oils. "I'll have to book one," Jessica had whispered loudly. "Isabella, it's probably out of your price range, but you should see if they have a simple polish." He took us down to the cavernous, temperature-controlled wine cellar, a library of priceless vintages from around the world. He spoke of rare Burgundies and investment-grade Bordeaux. He offered them a taste of a particularly fine vintage, and Eleanor had swirled her glass, proclaiming its notes of oak and subtle despair with the air of a seasoned sommelier, though I knew for a fact she preferred sweet Moscato. Throughout the tour, I remained in the background, a quiet observer. I listened as Eleanor and Jessica asked loud, uninformed questions, trying to showcase their worldliness. I simply watched, a faint, knowing smile on my lips, my calmness seeming to unnerve them more than any argument could have. Finally, David led us to a private, gilded elevator at the far end of the main lodge. "And now," he said, his voice taking on a new level of reverence, "for our final stop." The elevator ascended in silence, opening onto a single, hushed, private floor. Before us stood a pair of magnificent, hand-carved double doors. "This," David announced, "is the heart and soul of Sterling Point Lodge. It is named for our founder. This is the Founder's Suite." He explained its history, its exclusivity, how it was reserved for visiting royalty, for world leaders, for the select few. Eleanor and Jessica were practically vibrating with the mixture of awe and self-importance. To be here, to be seeing this, was the ultimate validation of their status. "We rarely show this suite," David Chen continued, producing a heavy, ornate keycard. "But we have been preparing it all morning for a particularly valued VIP who was visiting with us this weekend. I thought you might appreciate a glimpse." Eleanor gave Jessica a triumphant, conspiratorial glance. This was it, the grand gesture, a complimentary upgrade to the best room in the house. Jessica could barely contain her glee. "Oh, David, you shouldn't have," she gushed, already picturing herself on the private terrace. "This is just too much." David Chen inserted the keycard. The lock clicked open with a satisfyingly heavy sound. He pushed open the grand double doors, revealing a space that was less a hotel room and more a private palace. Sunlight streamed through 20-foot-high windows, illuminating a grand living room with a concert piano, original works of art on the walls, and beyond, a sprawling private terrace with an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the mountain range itself. The family gasped in unison. They stepped inside, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated awe. As they wandered, lost in their wonder, David Chen took a step back into the hallway. He turned not to Eleanor or Jessica, but directly to me. He walked past them as if they were invisible, his professional smile still perfectly in place, but his eyes holding a new, deeper level of respect. He stopped directly in front of me, in front of Liam, in front of the entire, stunned Harrison family. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence of the opulent suite with the clarity of a diamond. "Mrs. Isabella," he said, with a slight deferential bow of his head, "I trust your new accommodations will be more to your liking. On behalf of the entire Sterling Point staff, I want to personally and sincerely apologize for the inexcusable error with your room last night. It will not happen again." He then gestured to the palatial suite behind him. "Your luggage has already been brought up. Welcome home." The general manager's words, "Welcome home," echoed in the cavernous, silent suite. They landed with the force of a physical blow, not upon me, but upon my husband's family. The air which moments before had been filled with their gasps of awe and desire was now thick with a stunning, suffocating silence. It was a silence so profound I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. I watched as if in slow motion as the full weight of the revelation descended upon my mother-in-law. Eleanor's face, which had been alight with smug triumph, seemed to crumble from within. Her proud matriarchal posture collapsed, her shoulders slumping as if under an immense, invisible weight. The blood drained from her face, leaving her expensive makeup looking like a garish, painted mask on a woman made of chalk. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound emerged. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, abject horror. It was the look of a person who had not just made a social blunder, but had committed a mortal sin against the very god of status she worshipped every single day. Beside her, Jessica's reaction was a faster, more frantic burn. First, a nervous, sputtering laugh, a desperate attempt to frame this as some elaborate, bizarre joke. That's very funny," she stammered, looking at Mr. Chen. But when she saw the deadly serious, respectful expression on his face as he looked at me, her laughter died in her throat, replaced by a gasp of pure, selfish terror. She was not just embarrassed, she was realizing that she had spent the last 24 hours relentlessly mocking the most powerful person she had ever met. My father-in-law, a man who had remained largely silent through the drama, simply sank onto the edge of an ornate sofa, his face a mask of weary resignation. He looked at his wife, then at me, and slowly shook his head, a silent acknowledgement of her catastrophic misjudgment. It was Liam who finally shattered the spell. A low chuckle escaped his lips, then another, until he burst into a loud, full-throated laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. The sound echoed through the silent, opulent room, a joyous cannon blast tearing through the thick fog of tension. He wrapped a strong arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his side. "Well, honey," he said, his voice ringing with mirth and pride as he surveyed the palatial suite, "I have to say, this is a bit of an upgrade from room 113B. His laughter was a permission slip for me to finally act. I was no longer the quiet, slighted daughter-in-law. I was the host. With the grace I didn't know I possessed, I turned to my frozen in-laws. "Please," I said, my voice calm and welcoming, "make yourselves at home. Can I get anyone a drink from the bar? I believe my grandmother kept the single malt in the crystal decanter on the left." My offer of hospitality was the final, quiet twist of the knife. We stayed for 3 more days, and those 3 days were the most excruciatingly awkward of the Harrison family's collective life. They were trapped. They couldn't leave without admitting defeat, but staying meant living inside their own monumental humiliation. They were my guests now, in every sense of the word. They spoke in hushed tones, they avoided my eyes, they complimented the thread count of the guest room sheets. The power inversion was absolute, and often comical. At the pool, an attendant rushed past them to bring me a private, shaded cabana with complimentary fruit platters without me even asking. At restaurants, the head chef came out to personally ask if my meal was to my liking, while my in-laws were attended to by a junior waiter. The entire staff, from the valets to the housekeepers, now treated me with a mixture of professional deference and a warm personal respect. They knew I was the founder's granddaughter, and my quiet, unpretentious demeanor seemed to earn their loyalty in a way Eleanor's demanding nature never could. On our final morning, as we were packing, Eleanor appeared at the door of our suite. She stood there, twisting her hands, looking small and defeated. "Isabella," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I feel I must say, I seem to have misjudged the situation." It was the apology of a CEO admitting a catastrophic business error, not of a mother-in-law admitting she had been cruel. It was an apology for her tactical mistake, not for her lack of heart. But it was all she was capable of, and it was enough. "Yes, you did, Eleanor," I said softly, without malice. "But the past is the past. What matters is how we move forward as a family, with respect, on all sides." She nodded mutely and fled. That evening, Liam and I stood on the private terrace of the Founder's Suite, looking out at the endless sea of stars over the dark mountains. "I've never been more proud of you," he said, pulling me close. "You handled that with more grace than they deserved." I leaned my head against his shoulder, finally feeling the full weight of the weekend. My Nana always said that true class isn't about the room you stay in. It's about how you treat the people who are cleaning it. The tiny, sad maid's room hadn't been an insult, I realized. It had been a gift. It had been a perfect lens through which to see the true character of my new family. The vindication wasn't about moving into this palace of a suite. It was the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing that I had honored my grandmother's legacy. I had reminded a group of people who only understood the language of money and status that the ultimate luxury, the one thing you can never buy, is dignity. The ultimate story of not judging a book by its cover. What do you think was going through Eleanor's mind for the rest of that vacation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of epic quiet revenge, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more daily stories where the underestimated come out on top. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.